Welcome to the Farming on Purpose podcast, a podcast for farmers and ranchers ready to shift for a stronger future. Today's challenges in agriculture are new, but the grit and determination required to be successful are not. On the Farming on Purpose podcast, you'll hear how producers of all sizes and practices are moving mountains for things they believe in, all in the name of an industry that keeps growing and innovating for a stronger food system and stronger farm families. I'm your host, Lexi Wright, and I'm excited to discuss where producers are finding success, challenging the status quo, striving for better, and keeping our heritage alive, all while producing the food we depend on. Welcome back to Farming on Purpose. Today, I am here with Jesse and Lisa Vivian. Jesse and Lisa are high school sweethearts turned microdairy farmers, and they live on a 20-acre farm, milking 10 cows once a day, selling all their milk locally. You guys have 3 kids, and you are in Pennsylvania. So I'm so excited. I haven't had anybody from Pennsylvania on the show yet. You're a first there. So I'm excited about that, and really just super excited because this topic is personally relevant for me right now. We just got our first dairy cow, and she calved over the weekend. So we've been learning so much about that. So this is perfect timing. And we've had I don't think only one other dairy farmer on the podcast before. So this is awesome. I think folks will be really interested to hear your story. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you got to where you're at right now?
Yeah. So I'm Lisa. This is Jesse. Jesse was raised on a commodity-based dairy farm, and I'll let him tell you a little bit about that in a second. But unfortunately, like the story is for far too many commodity-based dairy farms, his parents had to sell, and they sold in 2014. And when they sold off all of their herd. We, at the time, were living on this 20-acre little farmstead, but we only had a couple beef cows. We didn't have any dairy, and we really didn't have any intention to dive into dairy here. But as we watched his family sell their herd of cows, Jesse called and was like, there are a couple heifer calves here. This would be the end of my parents' lineage, all 38 years of their dairy farming. What do you think if we bring them home and we take some time and try our hand at a little jugging dairy? So that's how it started.
Yeah. So this region of Pennsylvania, the Allegheny Mountains region, it's hard to have a huge scaled farm, but Pennsylvania has always been a top 5 dairy state traditionally. We're not right now because we're going through this, there's rapid expansion in the dairy industry right now. And a lot of areas of Pennsylvania can't reach the scale you need to get to now. We've actually lost over 6,000 dairy farms in the last decade, including my parents. In 2018, when I left the farm in 2014, because it was no longer economically viable to have me trying to make a living there, my sister trying to make a living there, and my parents. We were milking 110 cows and farming 600 acres, and that just doesn't fit the commodity scaling. And so I left, went and got a job, kind of helped out here or there. And then in 2018, when they decided to disband the herd, it was, like Lisa just said, it was the moment where it was like, well, that's going away. Probably because my mom had gotten hurt. That's what happened. That's what made them finally decide it's time to stop. And I just figured that, that was the end of our farming career. And so we bought the 2 calves and thought we would try the jugging dairy, and really just wanted it to be a hobby. Just keep myself in agriculture and let my kids have an experience similar to what I had, which was never going to be the same as what I had, but just something. And one thing led to another, and we started direct to consumer selling milk, and the expansion there, and Lisa can talk about that here in a minute. But
yeah,
that's kind of a background of where we're coming from. Like, at one time when I was a little kid, there was 100 dairy farms in this region, and I was just talking to a friend of mine, and he said and this is commodity shipping dairy farms, there was 100 of them, and he said now there's only 7 left.
Oh my God,
that's what it is.
Wow. I didn't realize it was at that scale. Knew that, you see the stats often of the reduction in farms, especially in dairy, but wow,
most of those farms were 100 or less cows milking. And that's just the size that can't survive in this, in the new scale. And that just is what it is. Mm-hmm. So we found a different way.
Yeah. It was like, we know we can't do that, but what could we do?
Yeah, because to go to the scales they needed to get to, it was going to take millions of dollars. And there's just no access to that for us.
No.
Absolutely. That's a really challenging place to be, to see something that you grew up with and your parents worked so hard because they were first generation, right?
Yeah. They bought the farm. My grandparents on my mom's side both grew up on dairy farms, but her parents, neither one of them stayed on the dairy farm. And on my dad's side, his grandpa had a dairy farm, and it was more of a kind of a farm like me and Lisa have. Like, he was doing a lot of direct to consumer sales stuff, but his farm actually was eminent domained by a school and became a school. So all of those farms they didn't have access to. My mom's cousins run the farms that her grandparents had, but none of those farms are in existence anymore either.
Wow. I think there's a lot of heritage in dairy farming, and the amount that is just kind of the same thing happening there is just so hard to watch and experience. So I'm so glad that you guys have found a way to keep going and give your kids this experience. So tell us, since those 2 heifer calves, what has that process looked like?
Okay, so we started out with
Buttercup and Lily.
Buttercup and Lily, and we wanted to get, licensed and everything so that it was all above board with pasteurization. So we found a guy named Frank Kipe at Microdairy Designs, and his small scale pasteurizing system was affordable for us. And he has blueprints and stuff. We used his blueprints to build the barn. We sent them to our inspector, and our inspector okayed the blueprints, said, if you guys build that creamery and that facility, you won't have any problems.
I should back us up. So this is pre-COVID, and we are in a tiny little community. Our entire population in our town is less than 3,000 people. So when we had 2 cows, Jesse actually went to a cheese making course because we thought, no one's going to want this milk. Like, they're going to think this is weird. They're not going to know.
Homogenizing.
Yeah. They're not going to understand what this is. We're not even sure we're going to be able to sell milk. And originally we talked to our inspector about raw, and he was like, you could definitely do that. But in the state of Pennsylvania, the testing fees for raw milk would have made it almost impossible to make any real money with 1 cow. So we thought, you know what, versus going the milk route, let's make cheese, because everyone loves cheese. So Jesse went to a cheese making course.
We thought we could have this cheese making hobby, and we could dry the cows up and have 60 days without milking cows every year. Where we could do vacations and stuff like that.
Yeah. So that was our original plan.
Yeah.
And then, that's where the vats came from, because we were like listening to podcasts, and everything we heard, the farmers would tell us it takes $1 million to start value added producing on a farm, because you have to build the creamery to specs. And they made it so scary and so out of reach that we were almost defeated before we started.
These were huge scale creameries.
Yes.
For 60 to 100 cow farms.
Yes. So then we found Frank Kipe on a podcast, and that's kind of what happened. And Jesse went to this cheese making course, and we're like, already we were making butter and cheese on our own and giving it to friends and family. And it's going really well. And then, we got our official inspection in February of 2020, and everyone knows what happened then. So the food scarcity shortage came out, and it just hit us like a wave. We had no idea what was coming, but every drop of milk we made, we sold before we ever had a chance to turn it into cheese. And so our cheese business became we've never made cheese.
Right.
That is crazy. COVID changed so much for direct to consumer farms. Like,
how about
I don't know if it will ever go, like, if anything will ever happen again that has that much of an impact.
No, I agree. And it's really been a beautiful thing. Like, I mean, we have more people coming out here they just want to see a cow. I never ever thought of where my milk came from, but now I would really like to see these cows and see how they live and see what they eat.
When you're producing artisan products like this too, you can get some unique flavors and people just remember that flavor. They want to come back for that again, and again and again.
Yeah. So by March by March of 2020, we knew that it was going to be milk only. We were going to be a milk-based business. And we just kind of went with it. I mean, we started by increasing our herd size, but by the end of 2020, how many cows were you milking?
6.
Okay. Yeah. So we went from 2 cows. Well, Buttercup was fresh, and then Lily came fresh in a few months after. And then we bought 4 more cows just to keep up with demand. We were milking at the time twice a day. And this is what we talk about in our course a lot, is the most monumental change in our business was the transition from milking twice a day to once a day. Because Jesse and it happened out of necessity. Jesse got a back injury because he was lifting that bucket milker so many times. And it was like, this is so hard. This is almost too hard, because now instead of just milking cows, now we're talking about processing, bottling milk in the middle of the day and delivering milk and selling it. So it's not like we had all this free time to try to get stuff caught up. It was like from milking cows to processing and bottling milk, selling milk, and then back to milking cows. And then, a 14-hour day is gone in a flash and you have no downtime at all. So I found a farmer, Ben and Kristen of Creambrook Farm, actually in Virginia. They're a raw milk herd share farm, the nicest people. And they were milking once a day at the time. And I got a hold of Kristen and I was like, listen, I've got this bullheaded,
it is really hard to
commodity-based dairy farmer.
We milk cows twice a day.
Who was not willing to consider this, but you're talking it up. And so they were so gracious. They joined us on a Zoom call, or a FaceTime call, actually. And Ben talked us right into it. And ever since then, it has just been, I mean, I like to say smooth running. We've had our ups and downs, but so much better.
Every time you make a big change like that, what that did is it freed up 3 to 4 hours a day. Mm-hmm. And in that 3 to 4 hours a day, we were able to start doing value added products and really increase the bottom line then. And just things kept falling into place after that. Because in the beginning, we're just working so hard that we couldn't get above the business to kind of figure it out. Because we were both working off-farm jobs still. Like, I was part-time real estate at that point and full-time farming, and just trying to keep up with it all, it was getting overwhelming.
That right there, I think, is one of the biggest issues that beginning and transitioning farmers run into. Is it takes so much manual labor and time to get started that taking a step back just doesn't happen. There's no time for it unless you force it to happen like that.
So you need to force it. Yeah.
You do. The biggest question I know everyone has about switching to milking once a day, especially where some commodity farms milk 3 times a day now, is what was your change in production?
Yeah. The original change in production, depending on where the cows were in their lactation, but to just make a flat number, it was probably 35 to 40% reduction. But when the cow came fresh the next time and just starting her off in once a day milking, it's probably only 10 to 15%. Depending on the cow,
and we were ready for it. We added another cow, and we knew that was going to happen, so we knew there would be a drop. But then the biggest and best surprise is we've had 0 cases of mastitis, which we were so worried about. 0 altogether. And the other big surprise was, when they came fresh again, the next lactation, and they've held strong at just like a 10% reduction. I mean, we are a microdairy. We are artisan. We are not pushing for production. We never have. We don't feed any haylage or silage feed. We only feed grass or dry hay, and then a grain mineral supplement. And it's not very much. So we weren't ever pushing for high production. All of our cows are Jersey, and that was never a big part of our business model. And like Jesse always says, I would rather milk.
Yeah, I told us.
Say that again. Yeah.
I'd rather milk 8 cows once a day than 6 cows twice a day.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, with the direct-to-consumer sales model and selling it to vendors in the surrounding towns, including our own town, there's so many other things I can do with those 4 hours that are so much more profitable to our business than just generating more product.
Absolutely. So you guys had this big change come then after you had done all this research. We're going to do cheese making and this. I'm sure you had this all planned out because that's how most farms and farmers do this, is that you do all the research and lay out the perfect plan. And then you had this huge change to that. How did you guys feel about that? And what was your first steps as people started coming to you looking for this milk?
Well, it was kind of out of necessity. Like, making cheese takes time, and we had no idea that we got our license to sell in the end of February, and COVID in Pennsylvania, the shutdown happened March 14th. And I just thought I had enough cheese in there to, slowly sell cheese out or whatever. And everything was instantly gone. We were completely cleaned out.
We thought it'd take months.
And my friend who helped me build the whole buildings, he's a carpenter. He's like, I don't know why you want to mess around doing all that work to make cheese. This is the best milk I've ever drank in my life.
Yeah.
Why don't you just sell this?
Yeah.
And that's all we could make to keep up with the customers.
Yeah.
And we were actually sold out all the time. That's how we knew it was time to buy more cows.
Yeah.
The hardest thing to do was to just say, sorry, we're sold out.
Mm-hmm. I remember one time I was at work. I work in a hospital full time. Like, how about that juxtaposition? Farm life, sterile hospital life. But I was at work one day and I had posted before I left, or scheduled a post that said, the farm fridge is full of milk. Come on out. And Jesse texts me at 8:30 in the morning, is like, make it stop. Turn it off, whatever you did.
It's just like a line of cars down the driveway.
And we're back this little dirt lane, and it's not really suitable for a lot of traffic. And so that's when we made our biggest move, which was finding a vendor to sell our milk from. That's another huge valuable asset. And again, I know this isn't going to be for everyone. I mentioned, and we'll talk a little bit more about the course we built, but we are pasteurized. We're VAT pasteurized. So we can, in the state of Pennsylvania, sell our milk at any other stores. And that was a huge profit boost for our business. And it also took a lot of the weight off of us, because then once we started getting overwhelmed with customers, we started just putting the milk in a store who had longer, more extensive hours, they had easier access.
Wait on the customers.
And they took a lot of the brunt of the
demand we created. And I'm still not even sure how we actually did that. I mean, it was Lisa's great social media prop.
I don't know. I just started telling the story.
Just started coming, and then we just started expanding, and we actually got ahead of ourselves a couple of times in this process, as far as buying too many cows and then having to buy a vat because we couldn't process all the milk we were producing. But 3 years of ups and making good mistakes, it's all worked out.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I mean, that's definitely a good problem to have, although I'm sure in the moment it's oh, what did we do? How long did that take before you guys decided to look into using a vendor?
A couple of weeks. We were in a vendor by spring. Yeah, it was quick. It was very quick. And I know that now I'm going to sound like I'm all over the place. I should back up a little bit. I know I mentioned when we were first getting started and first looking into this, we heard about Frank Kipe, and he's the guy who owns Microdairy Designs, and they do those, smaller vats, which make, you can make cheese in them. We make our eggnog and our gelato mix in them now. They're very useful. But the whole system, when we bought it, was $15,000. So coming from podcasts where people said, if you want to value add products, in your dairy farm, you're going to need $1 million. And then Jesse called Frank, and Frank's like, absolutely not true. You can put your own little creamery on, talk to your inspector, come up with a plan. So when all was said and done, before we started, we had saved up, and it was just $30,000 for everything, for the barn addition, the electric upgrades, all of the parlor, milk house, creamery, all of the equipment to get started, all of it. $30,000. So in stark contrast to the podcast telling us you need $1 million, we were like, okay, if we can do this for $30,000, we'll just, we don't drive very nice cars. We're like, we'll just pretend that this is a nice car we bought. And if it doesn't work out, it's okay. We're not out the end of the world.
It would be a really nice place to hang out.
So that is another one of our best, advice tips for anyone trying to get started is be as scrappy and small as you can, and try to avoid diving into a ton of debt to get your creamery going, because it makes it so much more flexible whenever your business is growing, because then you don't have to worry about paying a payment every month. It's already paid for. You're just trying to let the business grow itself in the beginning.
Absolutely. I'm glad you backed up there and talked about what you like, the research you did and what you ended up going with, because it can be really scary not knowing what the infrastructure is going to cost to get started. Exactly. So when you called Frank and you talked about that, was that like a big shock to you that that's all it was going to cost after hearing all this? Or were you kind of like thinking there has to be another way?
I had already heard him talk about this on a podcast. So I was surprised about some of it, but like I had a general idea what he was going to tell me, but it was a relief. Surprise and a relief for sure.
And then you also mentioned that you worked closely with your inspector. I'm assuming, is that the state level?
Yeah.
Like
the milk sanitation inspector.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. You want to talk a little bit about your experience with that? It differs in every state, I know, because every state has slightly different rules, but what was your experience like with that?
It was great. I mean, the two inspectors we dealt with, one was retiring he only had about 6 months left till he was retiring. So he was actually training his replacement when we started. Both super supportive of the idea.
And we should say too, Jesse was very hesitant. On a commodity dairy farm, the inspection is a big deal.
Yeah, they still make me nervous.
So he was very anxious to talk to an inspector. Like, this is never going to pass. There's no way. And honestly, our milk sanitation inspector was on our side, and he still is. He still sends people to us. Like, you got to check out what these people are doing. He has been so good to us.
In the state of Pennsylvania, it seems like our inspectors want these to get off the ground, want them to work, want them to go there. Like if you start out the whole process with, them on board and letting them help you and guide you, I think it goes a lot smoother. That's kind of what we did. That's kind of the advice we got. And they've been nothing but supportive for sure.
It's true.
So did they come out and take a look at your facility, or did you just submit your designs that you were going to be doing? How did that work for you?
I submitted the designs, and they said, if you build that, you won't have any problems. And then they stopped in when we had the building built. There wasn't any equipment installed yet. And they said, yep, this is exactly what you needed to do. And then we got the equipment installed and we got our permits, and it didn't take that long, really. 6 months, maybe?
Yeah, maybe from start to finish.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then the other thing I wanted to talk a little bit more about is the raw milk versus the vat pasteurization that you guys do. Mm-hmm. So that's obviously a big decision as well, and different than probably what you grew up doing, Jesse, on a commodity farm.
Yeah.
Raw milk is like having its moment on social media, I feel like. So how did you guys make that decision, and what kind of influenced you to do one thing versus another?
Yeah. So that was our initial plan, was we were just going to use the vats to make cheese and sell the milk we had raw. But I mentioned earlier, our milk sanitation inspector in the state of Pennsylvania, you have to send your milk to a reference lab for testing. Our pasteurized products have to go once a month, and then raw milk goes between 2 and 3 times a month, depending on, I don't know, whatever their guidelines are. So when we only had one cow, our inspector was never like, you guys shouldn't do this. This is a bad idea. He said, if you do this, these are what your fees for milk testing are going to look like. Or you have to put in your own lab on your facility, which is going to cost tens of thousands of dollars. He said, these are the fees for raw, and then these are the fees for the vat pasteurized. So in the beginning, sending milk at
it just didn't pencil.
It didn't make sense for us. With one cow, it was like all of our profits are going to be sent to this lab for testing, just so that we can be, on board with the state qualification. So we just started using the vats to pasteurize the milk simply out of necessity. We had one cow. We didn't want to spend that much money on milk and testing fees. The more we looked into it, and the more, we talked about it, because we also love and believe in the benefit of raw milk. We are not at all against it. Just for our business model, it didn't make sense at the beginning. And since that's what we started with, we kind of just kept going.
And we had already purchased the vats anyways. Yeah. We already had the ability to pasteurize the milk because we wanted to make cheese in the vat.
Yeah. And just to avoid the fees. And the other thing too, with raw milk, there are a lot of limitations on where you can sell it from. So that would have limited using our vendors to sell our milk to. We didn't actually look into the specific details. And again, every state is different. But for us,
my personal opinion, it broadened our customer base.
Yeah. And again, we started before COVID. So like that, so the raw milk hadn't had its moment yet either. So we were thinking, gosh, is anyone going to understand this or trust us with this? Are they going to have old memories of, the scary stories of raw milk that were few and far between from hundreds of years ago or 50 years ago?
And speaking of that, like we had a lot of our original customers were people who had went to farms. They were like in their 60s, 70s. They went to farms and bought milk directly from the farmer. And like so many of those people came in and said, I've been waiting for this milk for 30 years.
Yeah.
Where have you been?
Yeah.
Like, thank you for doing it.
And that was the other big take home. So while we were like, gosh, we would love to be able to just produce raw milk, when we started using our vats to vat pasteurize. So vat pasteurization is the low temperature, slow method of pasteurization, the old Louis Pasteur method. You bring the milk up to 145 degrees and hold it there for 30 minutes and then cool it down. There's a lot of benefit to that. It still preserves a lot of the good bacteria. So a lot of the flavor was just fantastic, and we drank raw milk and then we drank our vat pasteurized milk. It tasted the same. Our kids and our family digested it the same. So we really felt good about selling it that way too. And because we don't homogenize and the cream rises, we really do feel like we're selling a really great quality product, even though it's not raw, which would have been ideal, but
it's funny how some of those things just work out. Like you already had the vats, it worked perfect. So you could go to the vendor then when you started seeing all this increase in demand. That sounds like it just worked perfectly.
Yeah. And it really our milk saleability, because like Jesse was mentioning, we have, milk pints through coffee shops and pizza shops and delis all through the Tri-County area where we live. So that really helped too, is increasing saleability of our milk.
That's awesome. I want to talk a little bit about the delivery schedule, because it sounds like you guys are in an increasing number of places. Has that put any extra effort on your end? Have you had to expand in other ways to accommodate that?
Well, yeah, we so I do all the delivering, and we have, I think, 10 different locations where we sell stuff in our local area. And so that delivery schedule got quite taxing. So we actually bought a larger vat. So now we run the 16-gallon vat with the flavored milks and the 45-gallon vat with white milk, and we only have to pasteurize 3 days a week then. Mm-hmm. So that freed up a whole couple of days now, instead of pasteurizing 7 days a week, sometimes twice in one day to keep up. Mm-hmm. The second vat gave us the time to be able to get to all the vendors now.
Absolutely. So then it sounds like your storage situation also got a little bit more complex. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, we had not anticipated going to, we really thought we're milking 3 to 4 cows here. Well, actually owning 4 cows and milking 3 and always having 1 dry and making cheese as a hobby. So that's kind of what I set the barn up for originally, to now, there's 12 cows in there. We're milking 8 right now, but sometimes we're milking 10, depending on how many cows are dry, and producing way more milk. So we didn't build any way to store this many plastic milk jugs, or we just didn't have the plan for this. So we've gotten creative and, just do whatever it
takes. Back them to the roof.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you could join us today. You can support the mission of the Farming on Purpose podcast and be part of the tribe dedicated to building ag legacies at farmingonpurpose.com/shop. You'll find apparel, office supplies, stickers, planners, and more, all inspired by the people living out ag legacies every day.
I want to talk a little bit here. I have a lot more experience with beef cattle than dairy. And so this concept of rotating which cows are calving at different times is kind of a new concept, because in beef, you want all of them to calve in a very small window. Yeah. So do you want to talk mainly for my benefit, about how you guys plan out who's going to, how many you're going to have in milk at a time?
So, depending, we're selling fluid milk, so we want to be producing fluid milk year round. Ideally, your cow milks for 305 days and she's dry for 60. So you know that going in, because you really don't want to milk a cow longer than 10 months or her milk starts to bitter. That's how they wean their calves. So you you look at the number of cows you got. How do we stretch this milk production out? And we've gotten to the point now where we actually know where the slow months are. And that's where we try and have the most dry cows. In months of June and July, and then January and February is when we want the most dry cows, because that's when we're selling the least amount of milk. And our goal is to sell every drop we produce, or have a little bit that we don't get sold, which is fine. We never want to be under any.
Right.
But we're never going to be able to, on the size of the scale of our farm, we're never going to be able to make sense to sell commodity. We're just not going to be able to get that big. It would cost us more to ship milk than what they would pay us because of the hauling fees.
Yeah.
So
how you breed?
So we try and breed. So a cow's gestation period is 282 days. So we try and, plan that out so that we have a majority of our cows milking from the end of summer into winter, and then what? I wasn't really planning on answering this question, so give me a second to wrap my head around it. Again, you're gonna have a 60-day dry period. So when you have that 60-day dry period, you need to have another cow milking for those 60 days to fill in the gap where that cow's not producing. They produce the most milk the first 90 days of the lactation, and then they slowly slow down. Mm-hmm. So you just have to know how many cows you're milking and how much milk you want to produce, and time those first 100 days where they start to tail off. And that's where you want another cow to come fresh to replace the tail off. And then as you get more cows, the tail offs aren't as dramatic, and you can spread them out. We try and have 2 cows come fresh every month between the months of August, September, and November, and then again in March, April, and May. Mm-hmm. And then you'll have a random cow that didn't get pregnant at the right time, and you just have to plan around that. But that's our attempt. But cows always sometimes mess with things because they're living animals and things don't work ideally or robotic. But that's the goal.
That's really cool. And I think that's helpful for people to think about, especially regardless of if they have involvement with dairy animals or not, just from a supply chain of food standpoint, for people to know that that's how farmers are planning and how things work, and that it's not just buy a cow and all of a sudden you have milk. That's just not how it works.
Yeah, I guess I didn't touch on that. If a cow doesn't have a calf every year, she stops producing quality milk. And eventually she'll just stop producing milk altogether. Yeah. So you have to have her have a calf every year. Mm-hmm. So you have to have a plan for that. And on this small scale farm where we're direct to consumer selling, we ran out of, we can't raise any more calves. We're out of space. So we actually breed all of our dairy cows now to beef animals. And we sell the calves to my parents who still run a beef operation. And then they raise the calves, and we resell those calves through our store then as retail beef. And that's really helped boost the bottom line too.
That's a perfect segue.
They have 12 less brood cows they have to worry about. We're feeding them calves. And occasionally when we know, okay, we're getting a cow that's, getting to closer to the end than the beginning, we'll breed a Jersey calf in her or another cow. So we'll have a replacement. But for the most part, we've just been breeding with Anguses for the last 2 years because we've hit our maximum amount of cows.
That's a perfect segue. I was going to ask if you had any plans to expand further, or if you were just really happy with where you're at and what you were doing with the calves. So that's perfect.
We're always planning on some type of expansion just to keep growing, because in small business, right? If you're not growing, you're slowly dying. So we've been adding value-added products. We make yogurt now.
Yeah. Eggnog is fun and huge.
Eggnog. We do gelato year round now, and we're actually trying to figure out how to ship it to the places we can ship it now, including our retail locations as well. Yeah. And so that's our goals pushing into the future here, is to just stay part of the local food movement with the milk and gelato, but maybe become a regional player with gelato because it's a shippable product.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you're looking at more product expansion. When did you guys start adding on some of those value-added products, and how did you decide what you were going to do first?
Yeah. So the first value-added product we added was in 2020. Our brother-in-law is a CPA, and he was like, you need to find a way to like get this milk to people who are just like at a pizza shop for lunch. Like I would rather have milk than a Mountain Dew, but there's nothing there. So we did pints, which that was a huge asset for our business. So we started, playing around with really great flavors. And I always was so keen to get the cleanest ingredient labels that we could, no artificial flavors or dyes or preservatives or anything like that. And we have some really great milk flavors for that. And then the next thing we added was the ice cream mix. The gelato mix, I think, was next. And we didn't do that until November of 2022.
I think we did eggnog at the same time.
Yeah, and we did do some eggnog then, but a little bit. But yeah, November of 2022, it was, just before Christmas. We knew the vats could make an ice cream. We picked gelato simply because gelato is an Italian ice cream that's very milk heavy. You don't need as much cream. American ice cream is like 50% creamed to less than that of even milk when you add all the other ingredients. But gelato is almost 70% milk with just a little bit of extra cream. It makes sense when you have dairy cows because we've got loads of milk and we have their little bit of cream, but I didn't want to have to cream separate a lot of milk. So we picked gelato, and then we actually started our gelato business on a total whim. We had one flavor of gelato, and we found a local ice cream maker and asked her if she would let us use her machine. And it was a win-win. We learned so much from her. We just took our base up, she poured it in her machine and then cranked it out the other end for us. We packed it and sold it because we wanted to kind of trial run and see how it went. And it was so well received that in a few months we bought our own machine. And then we added yogurt in 2023.
Yeah.
Which is the best. Like, and the people that try our yogurt, it's as simple as we don't strain it. It's just a pourable, like traditional European style yogurt that is just milk and yogurt cultures. And people that try it are just amazed. Like, this tastes nothing like yogurt in the store. And it really doesn't. It's so different. So yeah, we did yogurt and then eggnog again, which is such a fun product to make.
And that came about because we in the beginning didn't have a great plan on how to handle the cows coming fresh again after we purchased them, because we were just purchasing cows to keep up with our demand we created. And then all of a sudden we had extra milk. Mm-hmm. So now that we've got extra milk, what are we going to do with it?
We need some shelf life now.
And now we're grabbing shelf life. Ice cream's a year, yogurt's about 30 days, where milk is only 17.
Mm-hmm. So it definitely made a difference.
Definitely. The gelato I love. I think I've only had like real gelato one time, and it is just so different from so many ice creams that you would try from the store, or like soft serve and all of that. Like, it's very distinct. So that's cool. You guys are able to offer such unique products too. I'm sure that's a big contributor to like the niche industry that you found. The other thing I was going to say, for the people, since this is a podcast, for your benefit, you need to go to their Instagram and look at the videos and the photos that they have of the flavored milks, because they are beautiful.
Oh, like, thank you.
I love looking at, they look like marbled. It's so pretty. Yeah. I did notice, since we're talking about that, you guys do plastic jugs for your milk. And I know a lot, like, that's a big controversy, or, a big decision you have to make too, as far as packaging. Do you want to talk a little bit about your decision process there?
Yeah. And this one really hits hard with me, because in our town, we have a glass manufacturing plant.
Industry.
And it's one of the major industries in our small little town. So when we started this, that was a no-brainer. That's 100% what we're doing. We're going to sell milk. We're going to sell it in glass. When we ran it by our inspector, however, things had to change, because the state of Pennsylvania requires a commercial grade bottle washer. You cannot use a dishwasher. It has to be a commercial grade washer that has individual spouts that go into each bottle to wash and sterilize. That's the only way we could sell in glass. Those are about $20,000. So that in itself was like, put the brakes on. So we reluctantly found, that we had to move on to, we use HDPE plastic. It's not the ideal thing, but again, we are trying to be a sustainable business too. So sometimes you just have to make the hard choices and do what's best.
Yeah. I grabbed that piece of information out of John Martin Fortier, the guy who wrote The Market Gardener. He says this statement in a podcast somewhere. He says, the first rule to sustainability is economic viability.
Right.
If you're not viable economically, it's not going to be sustainable over the long term.
Exactly.
So you have to just make those decisions sometimes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that you say it that way because that's 100% the way that a lot of folks that we've had on the podcast say the same exact thing. You know, we can talk about sustainable agriculture all day long, but if it's not sustainable for the family trying to do the work, then it's not sustainable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that is one of our wish list items is one day a bottle washer. We don't have anywhere to put it, but it's still there. I'm not giving up on it.
It's going to require, a building expansion and a bunch of other things like that.
Yeah.
In the future.
Well, I think it's important to just address that those are decisions that you guys have to make as you grow. And every business owner that is going to try to do some kind of value added product or product direct to consumer has to make those decisions. And it's a lot more decisions than someone who is maybe selling their product at commodity prices,
Right.
because you guys are dealing with the packaging, the processing, the delivery, the sales, that. There's just so many more steps and processes that are involved for you guys. Has that been a challenge as you have grown to manage that all in-house?
I think the biggest benefit, yes, it has been a little bit of a challenge, but the biggest benefit is that we have each other. We're definitely a dual team. Jesse's the farmer. He takes care of the cows. He does most of the milk related things and selling and, serving our vendors. And I take care of all of the behind the scenes stuff, like obviously the social media, but then I also manage label design, keeping up with labels, in ordering products and flavorings and all of that stuff and doing all the back end research. But yeah, it really is I think if it was just one person, it would be a lot to try to manage all of that.
The true benefit of starting small and starting from basically zero is the slow growth curve that we've chosen to take because we only reinvest what we can out of the business. We're not going and getting big bank loans or anything. Since it goes slowly, you have time to have a learning curve.
Right. And we have. We've ordered the wrong, I've tried to cheap out on labels, order the wrong ones. Then I've got hundreds of dollars of labels that, wrinkle and the print washes off. And it's been a learning curve for sure. But we finally feel like we've really hit a sweet spot where we can just
we feel like we know what we're doing now.
Yeah.
So hopefully we do.
That's good. It's good to feel that way. It's definitely a good ego boost to feel like it's going well.
Yeah.
There's a lot in agriculture and starting a business that can make you not feel that way. So,
oh my gosh, I was just telling people the other day, one of the cows broke a water line in the barn and flooded the barn. Completely flooded it. We're having this great day, and Jesse's just so mad, such a madness. And the cows are just all standing there looking at you, and the barn is flooded. I was like, oh.
I told Lisa's uncle one time. I said, I know what I'm doing. I'm not sure I know what I'm doing. Does that make sense?
Yes. Perfectly worded there. Well, I'm glad you guys brought up that you guys being a couple really helps the farm situation because you can divide the roles and conquer a lot more together. I think that family farming model is almost a secret of success to the family farm. And it's in the name, but we so often don't remember that it's there because a lot of times family businesses get a bad rap because of lack of communication or just struggles between different family members, especially in generational farms. So is that communication and working together as a business versus as a married couple something that you guys have had to work on as you've grown?
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. I think we both work so differently too. And like I said, I come from my only background is lots of education and, college and then working in a hospital, which is very structured, it's time-based, time-oriented, very different than farm life, which is task-based. You finish one task and then you move to the next task. You're not watching the clock, you're finishing task. So that has been a huge eye-opener for me, to what it looks, to what it looks like to run a farm. And I think, I feel like we're getting better at it, but we still have our moment.
They listen to a lot of business podcasts. Those are maybe not necessarily ag-based business, but just business in general. And, some of those have given us some really good perspectives as far as everybody's got a role in this thing and we need to be able to communicate what our roles are and be kind to one another when there's a stressful moment instead of just getting angry and yelling at each other. Because, it's a business. There's going to be stress points occasionally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you have any favorite podcasts that you would recommend for folks who are in an ag business or just in business in general?
My personal favorite is Entree Leadership. It's a Ramsey show product. It's Dave Ramsey does the whole, debt-free stuff, but he also has a business podcast specifically designed for small business owners. Because like he says all the time, small business is the backbone of the American economy. It's 54% of the GDP. Without small business, this country won't work.
Right.
And he's like standing there saying, this is how I built my business from a card table in my living room, the hundreds of millions of dollars in generating funds every year now. And, he walks you through a process.
And even like, I don't love like financial podcasts. I don't want to listen to, budgeting all the time, but I love the Entree Leadership podcast because he just takes calls from small business owners and he just like walks them through troubleshoots or sometimes it'll just be a celebration of what they did in their business and how they did it. And so I love the community in that. I love hearing those stories. There's always something we can relate to or a problem that someone's having that I'm like, we had the same thing or we're dealing with the same thing. So we love Entree Leadership for business owners specifically. Farm related podcasts. You love
Farm Small, Farm Smart. Diego Footer does that one.
Yeah.
Another one I really liked was Grass Fed Life. It doesn't exist anymore.
But you can still listen to the old ones.
There's a ton of good ideas you can pull out of that.
Yeah, it's all small farm, grass-fed based farming. We love that one.
There was a lot of good ideas I got out of there. At least I like to tell myself I did.
That's awesome. I will have to check those out. I'm glad that you mentioned and it's come up several times as we've talked, but that the Dave Ramsey process or thought process and growing small, not taking out big bank loans. Obviously, that is incredibly in contrast with what most ag producers do.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I grew up in that way. Like, it's like, yeah, I still remember there used to be a huge farm community where I grew up. And like, they'd get together in the evenings around somebody's picnic table or fire or whatever. I still remember my dad and his friends going, it's only money and the bank's got lots of it, and you've got these huge asset heavy businesses, but your place is worth $1 million, $2 million. Just go get another home equity line. Just go get another business equity line. The assets there. My dad said this to me, and the guy that taught him to farm when he was a teenager told him this. You should never go into debt further than what the cattle and equipment can get you out. Because then if or when something goes wrong, at least you don't have to sell your farm. Just sell the cattle and equipment and you can get clear of the debt and move on with your life. My dad told me, after everything that happened at the farm with my mom's injury, he goes, he wish he wouldn't have broke that rule because he had to sell a big chunk of his farm just to be able to stay in the house and the barn and keep some of the acreage. He had to sell almost all of it. He had 325 acres. He had to sell it all to 20 acres. And
so we learned the hard way. That was really hard.
That is super hard. It still triggers an emotion in all of us because we put so much effort into that, and we were so proud of that place, and it's just something that had to happen. I'm so proud of them for being able to just keep a hold of it because it would have been easier just to sell the whole thing and move into town and buy a little house. And,
they still fight.
They fight hard. They were hard fighters.
They taught us everything. I mean, Jesse, everything he knows about dairy.
I still remind my A off my dad. He kept a couple lease farms. In fact, we don't grow any feed here. We have one tractor. It's to clean the barn, and I buy all my feed off my dad. And I think that helps us too. I know what my feed bill is going to be every month. We can adjust our prices of our products accordingly. And that's just one less thing I have to do because I'm doing so many other things around the creamery and selling. And he's just got the farm. I call him, hey, Dad, I need hay. He delivers some hay bales for me.
Yeah. But just to circle that all back, we had to live out that really hard lesson of what happens when you borrow more than you can afford. And so that was something when we first started. I mean, Jesse and I, we
already agreed it. So that was like,
this is a hard no. We are never borrowing money. Never. Because we don't want this to own us. We want to own it. We don't want this business to own us.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's incredible advice. And I completely appreciate you bringing up the feed, because that was something I was going to talk about and forgot. That feed for a dairy farm is a huge part of not only the price that you have to figure into your product, but also the flavor of the products that you are creating. So that's incredible that you have that resource in your dad and you can make that work really efficiently.
Yeah, we're really, really lucky to have him.
Yeah, you brought up the flavor. Yeah, anything your cows eat, the flavor will come through in whatever product they're producing for you. So you can really kind of hone in an artisan flavor if you found a flavor that you like. And, like ours is, we just feed dry hay and a complete feed dairy ration, no fermented feeds at all. And that has really left a sweet note at the back of the milk that people really enjoy. Mm-hmm. Now, we don't produce as much milk because we've made that decision, but we've created a unique flavor that people really like.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the more that we can talk about, kind of going back to the money thing, the more that we can talk about that in agriculture, the better. And the more that people are kind of trying to look at it from different angles, the better, because there is such a gap in understanding in how ag finance works, because I think we've gotten so used to just putting everything on a note and everything is owned by the bank and we just make our payments, which makes it really hard for young people to understand the big picture if they are, coming in as a second or a third or whatever generation to fully understand that, versus how you guys do it. Like, at any moment what is where you stand financially. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's been huge. It's been huge for our business. Yeah.
That's awesome. I kind of want to wrap us up on two things that you guys have experienced as you've grown. What's the biggest challenge or learning point that you have had? And then what's your greatest success been so far?
I feel like our biggest challenge and like the thing we learned most, and I know I already mentioned it, but once a day milking. I mean, when you are direct to consumer and you need the time to process the milk, with the commodity background where you're pushing a cow for production, to transition that to just what you need for your business. That was huge for us. And that changed the entire trajectory of our business when we switched to once a day milking.
Yeah. So that's time management.
Yeah.
Time management. And then our biggest success, I would say that it's finding direct-to-consumer sales and then finding a way to profit and make a profit at direct-to-consumer sales, small-scale farming like this, so that we could pull this off on an affordable footprint. And then just from there, saving enough in retained earnings that we can reinvest in the farm. Mm-hmm. And we don't need to go and borrow money from the bank every time we want to do any little thing. I mean, if we wanted to do something huge, we might, but again, we would stick to that rule. Like, we have that, we will not cross this line. Like, we're never going to go further than if like something happened and we had to quit, we sell the cows, we sell the equipment. There's no debt left on the farm.
Right.
We can just move on with our lives then. And, so I would say it's figuring out the direct-to-consumer sales model on small scale and then starting to scale it up from there afterwards.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I wanted to just thank you guys so much for being here today and sharing your story and all of the learning points. And I think folks can take so much from this episode. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you have going on right now and how they can follow up with you if they want to learn more or buy your milk if they're in the area?
Yeah. And that's probably one of our biggest successes too. When we started this, we had a bunch of local dairy farmers or farmers who had, families had closed their dairy farm and they wanted to get started again, but they didn't have a huge asset investment. We had them come to us and we have helped. I think we're at 5 now in our local little rural area. Local farmers, dairy farmers put on their own creameries. And that is so fulfilling. That's the coolest thing, to be able to see other other milk that from farmers that we helped and see them build success doing what they love. So we started, we took that same principle of teaching and we built it and created an online course called A Market Dairy. It's actually out. I just launched it February 1st of 2024. And we can definitely give your listeners a 50% off discount code. It's going away today, but I would be happy to give your listeners a code. It's a full course from start to finish. It gives our whole story, all of our recommendations and principles. And then we walk through like video based step by step, exactly how we process, bottle all of our milk products, and just give you a little glimpse inside of our exact business model. So you can try to, replicate or take what you want from it and build your own creamery. So we're really excited about that education. And then we are going to be starting a membership, like a low ticket monthly membership course in March of 2024. And we're super excited to just give community and have a way to teach all the things we've learned and then help other farmers get started.
I wanted to dive into that just a little bit here. That's a very different approach that you guys are taking to helping local farmers in your area do potentially the exact same thing that you are doing. Was that a little bit scary to take that step?
Not at all.
No, we can't, especially in the beginning when the first two people came to us, we can't supply our entire area. We can't supply our entire market base. Mm-hmm. We created such a demand for that product, we couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So it was nice that other people were able to get in. And I actually think that's actually elevated everyone.
Yeah.
Now more people have been exposed to artisan milk and artisan products coming from the farm, and more people want it. And it just keeps creating a bigger demand.
It's the coolest thing. And everyone we've helped has kind of taken their own little approach, kind of niched in their own direction. So, the one farmer, they're like in this flavored milk thing, and they also sell raw. So that's huge for the people that want raw. They can get it locally now too. But they have like 20 flavors of milk. I mean, everything you can think of. And then other farmers have kind of taken a different approach. We're doing cheese curds. So it's super cool to see this food movement come to our area, knowing that we were a part of it. We got to be a part of helping this grow.
Yeah. And we would get into another town and we wouldn't be able to supply it. And another farmer from that local town that was 20 minutes away was like, how are you guys doing this? And he would come. So now that town is able to get more of that milk that we can't supply other than the one place we went into. And it just keeps growing.
Yeah.
Hopefully it keeps going that way for people.
I know there's definitely room in every town for one of these creameries, and we would love to see it. One of our favorite quotes of all time is, the answer to America's food problem is not one or two big answers. It's many small answers. And we couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. That's what food security is all about. Not trying to necessarily feed more, but helping more people to feed more people. Awesome. Well, if folks want to check all those resources out, where can they find you online?
We have a website. It's www.lanesandcreamery.com. We are on Instagram at lanes.end.creamery and Facebook at Lanes End Farm Creamery.
Awesome. And thank you so much for offering a discount. This episode won't go live for a while yet, but if you guys reopen the course or anything like that, I can definitely.
Yeah, I'll definitely give your listeners a discount code, and they can have a week to use it once your podcast airs. That's fine.
Thank you. That's so kind of you. Well, thank you guys so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
If you've enjoyed spending time with us today, please take a moment to review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or join the conversation on social media. Do you have a topic you would like to discuss or know someone with a story to share? Apply to be a guest on the podcast at farmingonpurpose.com. You can follow the host of Farming on Purpose, Lexi, on your favorite social media platforms for more content by searching for Farming on Purpose. And remember, if you look around your table and aren't inspired by the people there, it's time to find a new seat.